an X-Files Rewatch podcast. Oh god, this is terrible.
What, really? You giving up already?
Yes. Well, no, okay. I'm Nick.
And I'm Kim.
And this isn't quite as bad as The Depths of Lone Gunman, but it's not a good stage of Season 9, is it?
I think you're being overcritical. You've got two of the best episodes in terms of critical ratings at the time this week. In fact, one of them is noted by critics as being the best Monster of the Week episode of the season.
What series were they watching?
I hope this one.
Okay. Before that, do you have any news?
Yes, I do, actually. I have some updates from FileFest. So, first of all, this is FileFest. This is the Ultimate X-Files fan convention, which is returning to the Mall of America on August 30th to the 31st of this year. So I said I'd keep you up to date with new guests as they were announced. Over the last couple of weeks, we've had 3 new guests announced. One is Pat Skipper, who plays Bill Scully Jr., Nicholas Lee, who plays Alex Krycek, and also Claudia Gray, the author of the most recent X-Files novel Perihelion, will make an appearance. And second of all, if you visit FileFest's Twitter or X account, which is FileFest_MSP, that's file with a PH, MSP Mother Sierra Papa. They have an Amazon wishlist on there at the moment if you want to help them by buying things. It's just things that'll help them make the convention the best thing ever that you can wishlist gift to them. I can't actually open the wishlist myself because it tries to change all my phone settings to America when I do, as it's an American wishlist. But yeah, if you do have access to Amazon.com, please consider donating stuff to them.
Cool. I don't do anything this time, so I think we have to have amnesia.
That's an odd segue into the episode.
Yes, well, it turns out we're actually going to talk about Disco Elysium. Wait, no, Planescape Torment. Dark City. No, Eden of the East. No, something else.
Some obscure references in there.
I'm sure some of those aren't that obscure.
What about Memento?
Well, it's not amnesia in the same way, because the rest of them were the protagonist loses his memory at the start, then has to find out what he did in the past, whereas...
Retrograde amnesia, not interrograde amnesia.
Yeah, Memento is quite differently, where he's continuously losing his memories.
True.
Okay, well, we're talking about John Doe. Directed by Michelle McLaren, written by Vince Gilligan, and first broadcast on the 13th of January 2002. Guest stars: Ramon Franco was Nestor, who was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Okay.
Resident Evil Extinction, Seinfeld, and House.
Okay.
Zito Kazan was Caballero, who was in Arrested Development, the original series run. He's in Angel and Buffy as the same character.
Okay.
Sliders, Waterworld, and Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Fair enough.
Renee Raymond Rivera played the first officer, who was in Disturbia. And then had a role that I went, what? Bubblegum Crisis, Tokyo 2040.
That's a bit different.
Eduardo Antonio Garcia played Marino Molina, who was in World of Warcraft, the game. F.J. Rio was the second officer, and in Star Trek Enterprise, Voyager, and DS9, and Seinfeld. And last, Barbara Patrick, wife of Robert Patrick, was Barbara Doggett.
Who you only see very briefly.
Yeah. She was in Lords of Illusions, a Clive Barker film I've never seen.
It's an adaptation of the book of the same name, I think.
I was looking at it thinking, she's probably not going to be in much. Oh, wait, she actually is an actress. For some reason, that hadn't occurred to me that she actually would.
And it wasn't just a cameo role.
Yeah.
Do you have a synopsis for this one?
I did, but I forgot it.
Would you like to try and remember it very quickly?
Yeah, okay. It's photo from Wikipedia. Doggett awakens inside an abandoned warehouse to find a man stealing one of his shoes. Doggett chases him outside, where he summons 2 Mexican police officers. One of the policemen hits the man with his nightstick, while the other demands his identification. When Doggett finds he has no papers, the officer asks his name. Doggett is shocked to realise he can't even remember his own identity. He is taken to the local jail, where he meets a fellow prisoner called Domingo. Domingo is eventually freed and offers to have Doggett bailed out as well, under the condition that Doggett help him perform his criminal tasks. Doggett agrees, but changes his mind once he's released. Nestor, Domingo's friend, pulls a gun, but Doggett quickly overpowers him and takes the weapon. Doggett returns to the warehouse in hopes of finding clues to his identity. From time to time he experiences flashbacks of his wife and son, but has no idea who they are. In the meantime, Skinner and Scully examine video footage from a security camera positioned at the Mexican border. Kirsch disbands the task force searching for Doggett, believing the video is proof that he entered Mexico of his own free will and was not abducted. Meanwhile, Doggett phones a US Marine Corps Public Affairs office, hoping his Marine tattoo will shed some light on his true identity. Before he's able to ask any questions, he notices policemen nearby and flees. Scully traces Doggett's phone call and has Monica Reyes travel to the Mexican town where he was last seen. It's revealed that Caballero, an enforcer of the local drug cartel, is a memory vampire. He can absorb the memories of those posing a threat to the cartel. Reyes finds Doggett and faces gunfire from the police, who are likewise controlled by the cartel. All the while, Reyes attempts to remind Doggett of who they are. Doggett remembers his son. The agents are rescued by Skinner and the Mexican federales. Doggett tearfully admits he was happy to have all his memories, even the bad ones, as long as I remembered the good.
Thank you.
It was kind of a shock to see Vince Gilligan's name come up at the start of this episode and go, oh, you're usually so dependable.
Before you say that, though, this is the episode I mentioned before that is largely considered to be one of the best episodes of the season.
Oh, I know.
It had absolute smash hit reviews. I couldn't actually find a negative one when I was looking through. And I think it was Den of Geek, in particular, who called it the best standalone episode of season 9 and something like a refreshing change of pace.
Okay. This is one of these weird ones where I was trying to think about this before when you said that it feels like the whole bad reputation that sci-fi fantasy has.
Okay.
As much as Game of Thrones was like a critical success and everything, people did like it, and things like the X-Files in the past, you find a lot of these critics, though, when you give them a sci-fi thing or give them a real-world set thing, they'll tend towards the real-world thing all the time, won't they? So real human dramas and everything.
It's more familiar.
It's more familiar. That's what they're invested in, and that's what gets high marks. Is Oscars. We make a note of if Oscars are ever sci-fi, fantasy, or horror because it's an exception. Usually, it goes to the dramas, romances, and westerns, maybe kind of thing.
It's possibly not something universal, but when I was a kid in school and you had creative writing homework set in English, I always used to lean towards like a sci-fi horror kind of bent to mine.
Yeah.
And I always got marked down, and my teachers told me that if you want to get good marks, you should focus on real world things. Horror and sci-fi won't get you good marks.
Yeah, that's also brought to mind, we went to a talk by Ian Banks before he passed away.
Yes, we did.
This is someone who is famous for his sci-fi novels, the cultural novels, wrote a lot of sci-fi, also wrote a lot of drama. And he made the point of, when you write drama or sort of real world set stuff, you have certain tools. It's like playing on a piano, I think he said. And you can do lots of things with it, but you are kind of limited. And sci-fi is a pipe organ. There are all these weird switches and weird valves and things you don't normally touch, and you have no reason to touch, but you can go mess with them and produce whatever you want out of it.
Yeah.
And I can't remember quite the point you ultimately made, but it was something like, there is a different character to both types of thing. My point of all this is, I would be suspicious how much these critics say they really like this episode, because it is crushingly mundane. It will make way more mundane than Pinefeld.
The Pinebluff variant, yeah.
That's the closest one I can think of we've had previously. I know this one does have a memory vampire, and I want to get to the memory vampire. But for the most of the episode, though, it's, as you also said, proto-Breaking Bad.
I was about to say, yeah, it's interesting that it's written by Vince Gilligan, who most famously went on to be the showrunner for Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul.
Yeah.
Because this does feel like proto-Breaking Bad, particularly the bits you see in Breaking Bad that are actually set in Mexico.
Yeah. It's very much the same kind of style, the same kind of characters and everything else. But it's the whole, is the positive reviews, is it the sci-fi prejudice kicking in, as in, oh, you've given us what looks very much like a non-fantasy story for a change.
Yeah.
We have to have Doggett in a mundane setting, and he has to deal with mundane things, and there's no vampires coming to rescue him, except there is. But
I like to think, I couldn't find Robert Patrick's impression of this episode.
Oh, that's a good point.
But based on the fact of he hasn't got on with some of the more supernatural ones lately that he's either found too disturbing or too silly, I wonder how he actually felt to be in this kind of crime drama instead.
It's a good question, and I'd say the fact that you couldn't find his comments would possibly indicate that he was fine with it. So, but I think my ultimate point of this was, I can understand, and I do worry about the snobbish attitude, because it's pervasive, it's still not gone away. As much as the MCU and everything is successes, 9 out of 10 times, the film critics don't want to watch sci-fi stuff. And I do understand and sympathize to a point why you wind up like that, but it's still a creative thing. You could try and engage with it, and people keep insisting they can't. Like, Final Fantasy Spirits Within.
Okay, yeah.
I read a really critical review. I mean, it's not a good film.
This was the first attempt at a Final Fantasy movie.
Yeah, it's not a good film by most stretch of the imagination. But it was when I read one critical review which just said the blue stuff absorbs the red stuff at the end and then it turns blue and everything's saved. And they were sort of saying this is incomprehensible. And it's like, if you listen to the words the characters are saying, they do tell you what the red stuff is and what the blue stuff is and what this means.
Yeah.
It's not incomprehensible, you just decided you don't want to pay attention.
You often find that when somebody's really not enjoying something is they just don't pay attention, though.
Yeah.
And therefore they're very quick. I find it quite often because, as you know, I play a lot of board games and tabletop games. And you often find if somebody's not gelling with a game, they just refuse to understand the rules and brand it as incomprehensible.
Yeah.
And you think, is it too complicated or are you just not engaged?
Yes. And I do think to a point that sci-fi just does that to people. Is that there are things that people will accept and will sort of go to bat for regardless, but they're kind of the exceptions.
I've got to admit, when it comes to sci-fi, I'm not really a fan of hard sci-fi. You know, it just doesn't appeal to me when you're boiling things down to numbers and technology and all the rest of it. I like the ones that are more fantastical.
Yeah. But neither of them get much respect.
No, it's true.
So, but that's my pet theory as to why this is a critical darling, because it's not an X-Files episode.
No.
With an asterisk, because it kind of is at the end, but it's a weird one.
It's interesting when we put this as Vince Gilligan's episode as well, because Vince Gilligan was actually the one who was trying to write a script about a psychic vampire. It was, I think, Franz Spotnitz that suggested the Mexican setting and having a major character lose their memories.
Yeah, why? Because I kind of like the memory vampire. I think the problem ultimately then is the fact that the memory vampire is in it so little, and there's so little explanation of what he's doing that it kind of undermines that as an X-Files concept again.
I think my bigger problem is it doesn't explain not only what he's doing, but the rules of how to break it. It just kind of breaks.
Well, I've got a more fundamental one for you there.
Okay.
This is people who cross the cartel. So from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, we know that if you cross the cartel, they will kill you.
Yeah.
What do you have to do to be, let's not kill him, let's just wipe his memories out with our pet vampire?
I'll go with Breaking Bad is sometimes the cartel punishments are grotesque, because you think Danny Trejo's character in it is somebody who's essentially squealed on the cartel.
Yeah.
He's an informant. And his name is Tortuga, which means turtle. So they have a hilariously cruel punishment lined up for him, which winds up with him decapitated and his severed head left on the back of a turtle.
Which then explodes.
And takes out a bunch of DEA agents. Yeah. So compare that with at what point we think this guy has wronged us, we're going to go with the exploding turtle punishment, versus this guy has wronged us, bring out the energy vampire.
Yes. I mean, to go with a bit further, so you said, the cartel are depicted as vindictive and cruel. That's fine. Vindictive and cruel with a memory vampire would be, you wipe his memory, you give him back to his family. That's the cruel factor.
But even the cartel, as they're shown in Breaking Bad, I call them vindictive and cruel particularly because of the vendetta that Gustavo Fring has, of what the cartel did to him to make him want revenge against him. I won't spoil it here. But again, it's not even the necessarily targeting the person, it's targeting something that will hurt them.
Yeah. And so the point is, though, for it to work, you wipe their memory and then you give them back to their normal friends and family, and you've given them a blank slate. That's the cruelty. But then again, it's not cruelty to the person who squealed again. That's cruelty to his family. It's an explanation that doesn't make any sense.
But they even have a concept of it in this town, so it must happen fairly often. I can't remember what they call them, but it's like the equivalent of them being the lost ones or something like that.
It's when you break the episode down, it doesn't make any sense at all. This is a very strange punishment that doesn't punish the person who did anything.
It would have been better if we'd done this in the Memento sense of done it over the shoulder with Doggett the entire time. So we're not seeing the outside, we're not seeing what's going on in the background, we don't know why Doggett's there at all.
Yeah.
You open with him waking up and just stick the focus on him always. And the focus in his confusion and him not understanding things. So we're just following him directly, which is what they do with Guy Pearce's character in Memento.
Yeah. Yeah, that would have been a bit better.
Because, of course, we're looking at amnesia here, and it's also the fantasy amnesia, because regular amnesia does not work this way.
Well, strangely enough.
regular amnesia is usually a temporary thing. You know, it can't wipe out such specific memories as you see in amnesia plots. It's more like you've had a massive head trauma and you've maybe forgotten the last few days or something like that. And you may never get that memory back. Or it may come back to you in flashes as you recover.
I mean, in this episode's defense, this is a weird supernatural being that has.
That's what I said. This is fantasy amnesia. The weird amnesia that means that you can remember how to drive and use a telephone, but you can't remember your actual name.
Yeah. And I think the other weird thing, and it's a kind of a weird contrast to the X-Files of old, is the memory vampire is the kind of thing that the FBI should never get their hands on.
Yeah.
Because, like, they got hold of Toombs, and then they lost him, and he died. They lost the Flukeman. They lose most of the supernatural entries they ever get their hands on. You can't let them have the memory vampire because people are going to ask questions and try and figure out how he does it and what he is.
I don't think you could keep the memory vampire too easily, because as soon as he gets his hands on someone, he's out that door.
Exactly. So I think it's the one where he's powerful because he's in this town where he's in control. And if you take him out of that situation, he loses a lot of his power very quickly.
To be fair, you're making a lot of assumptions about a supernatural being, because we see very little of Caballero seen very little in this.
I think the other shocking moment was when he just wiped someone's memories just in a bar. It's a case of, should you not be doing it somewhere secretive? Is everyone in on this?
I think pretty much everyone in the town's in on what he's doing. It doesn't seem to be a very well-kept secret.
No, but at the same time, it's just... that's very weird. Going back to one of your points is, I think the other weakness is we don't have any understanding of what Doggett was doing.
You've got to assume he was investigating this cartel, doing actual FBI work and not X-Files FBI work.
Yeah, but we leave that very vague, and then we cut back to Scully and Skinner saying we've got a task force looking for Doggett. Then Kirscher says, nope, he's gone into Mexico his own free will. It feels, I don't know, it feels like two episodes jammed together.
True.
And then we get the revelation about Monica, and I don't know if we meant to, or to already know that because she's got Monica Reyes, she's from Mexico.
She kind of has a Mexican surname.
Yeah, but it was kind of, I don't know how often this is going to come up again, the fact that she's from Mexico, just referencing this one episode.
True.
It feels a bit out of left field.
My biggest problem with the episode is it's used as development for Doggett, and, you know, has this kind of philosophy about it's not worth losing the good memories to also lose the bad ones. But we learn really nothing more about Doggett's situation that we didn't know previously.
No.
Because, you know, we as the audience already know that his son was murdered.
Yep. And he's got an estranged wife, we knew that.
So, as a way of developing Doggett,
it's very weak.
All you've done is given him very briefly at the end of the episode the option to forget about his son, and he has rejected this, and somehow it's completely, therefore, broken the memory vampire's powers.
Yeah. It does feel a bit like written to a corner. I mean, well, the other part was the corruptibility of the police, because I know it's fiction anyway, and police being corrupt is a regular thing, especially in, like, Mexican set stuff.
And in series like Breaking Bad again.
Yeah. It's just the whole confrontation when Monica finds Doggett via very... I don't know how she wound up in that warehouse.
Well, she's a bit psychic.
She is a bit psychic. Okay, we'll get to that in a minute as well.
Mm.
But then she gets in there, holds up, and then the police officer starts shooting, and they just start shooting back again. And it's can you imagine the reports on this afterwards? Like, how did Kirsch not fire everyone again? Because they were told explicitly not to do this.
And they kind of had the bit where the police are shooting and then the federales come and join in a bit as well.
And then arrest everyone, yeah. And then it's after Monica and Doggett are broken out in a bus and crashed.
Interestingly, most of the information about this episode I read was about that flipping bus.
What, really?
Yeah, because it was quite a high-profile stunt to do, having a bus smashed through a wall and then kind of flip onto its side. But it was an effect done with, I think it was 9 different cameras pointing at it, some playing at different speeds, so it made this really slow bus look like it was speeding through. Because Vince Gilligan made a point of something like you could have stood behind this bus and eaten a sandwich or something like that. It's one of these amazing camera trickeries that made something very, very humdrum on set look really dramatic.
Okay. I mean, on one hand, I want to say kind of kudos, on the other, that was like 3 seconds of the episode. I don't know if it needed that much effort taken on it.
I felt it was kind of like Chekhov's bus as well. It was pretty obvious where that was actually going.
Yeah.
Given how much framing was on repairing the bus and just fighting around it, dropping it on that guy's foot, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I do realise, I know it's one of these narrative things, but what is with everyone in fiction just knocking someone out and then leaving them on the floor where they've fallen over? And no restraint, then just go off into someone else and report that they've knocked him out or something. Like, what are you doing? He might wake up in the meantime and escape.
Well, if he doesn't get up right away, usually if
He's dead, yeah.
someone's unconscious for more than about 5 minutes, they're in trouble.
Yeah, I know. But that's not how fiction works, is it?
No.
You can be knocked out for like 3 days and it'd be fine.
Yeah. Seems perfectly alright. I can't see any lasting problems with that.
Of course not. I would say we kind of got skipped over it just because of the whole critic thing, but one thing I think both of us experienced as well when coming into this episode was we could remember the premise, but neither of us remembered the memory vampire, which is a real bad sign for the episode, I think. The fact that the most interesting thing about the episode is just forgotten.
I've got to remember, I remembered him having amnesia.
Yeah.
And I remembered it was a drug plot, and so in my head I was thinking, did they give him something that just knocked out his memories?
Yeah.
But that was about all I could remember from the episode.
And no, it's a memory vampire, but all we could remember was this premise that it was kind of tiresome and that somehow it ends and we can move on with our lives. And I think the fact it's not memorable is also a real slight against the episode.
And ironic in an episode about amnesia.
Well, yeah. I mean, one thing, and I can't remember if we brought this up in another context, it was, couldn't this be about the drug they have in Deep Throat? They have some way of erasing all its memories back then.
Oh, yes, right back at the start of the series.
Yeah, because we know the US government has this, and basically have never used it again, as far as we can tell. Why aren't we using it or trafficking it?
It works a bit, as far as we can tell, like the neuralizer in Men in Black.
Yeah. It's very targeted or something. In a way that also kind of feels implausible, but they're very vague on how they do it.
Yeah, it would have been curious to revisit that after all this time.
Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't make it a Monster of the Week episode anymore, but it's barely a Monster of the Week episode as is.
It's really its own thing, given that the monster is on screen for all of about 2 minutes of the episode.
Yeah. I mean, you do find this in other things. I'm trying to think of another good example where you find an episode that is so different, it's basically a pilot for something else that doesn't happen. In this, it effectively is a pilot for Breaking Bad. No thing I've ever read about Breaking Bad ever mentions this episode specifically as being part of it, but given who's involved, it would be very odd for it not to be connected. Do we have anything else about this episode? Because
I think it's a hard one to talk to. A lot of the draw of the episodes, I think, are things like its cinematography. Because, they do that kind of interesting camera trick where they make the outside look brighter by making the insides look darker of the buildings and things like that.
Yeah, there's a comment about the director of photography doing that specifically for this one.
Yeah, it's aping the kind of style of those old kind of cop movies that are set in Mexico, I think. They'd always do have that really distinct lighting to them to make, I guess, it look more arid and desert-like.
Yeah. And there's not a lot of yellow tint like you normally get in Mexico and other things.
I guess that's kind of good.
It is kind of good. I know. I think one of the things we're going to struggle with is that this is not a Breaking Bad podcast.
No.
This is not the kind of episode we're actually that interested in.
No.
And as you said, as much as it meant to be Doggett characterful episode, there's nothing new about Doggett to be revealed at all.
No.
Which feels like a complete waste if that's what you wanted to do.
No, it's a very good point. I do feel we should have revealed... We could have even used it so Doggett could remember something about his son's abduction that he didn't remember previously.
Yes.
Or just some way to kind of keep Doggett's subplot going.
Yes, absolutely. Recovering a memory he somehow healed over. A car lurking around. Because I thought when you saw his son go off cycling, he's like, is this the day? Are we seeing the day it happened?
I kind of guess so, yeah. But Doggett was here investigating something to do with the cartel anyway. Could you not have connected his son's death to the cartel in some way?
Yeah.
To give either a reason for him to be there or something he learns while there and realises it had some kind of drug cartel connection to it.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's a whole load of ways that this could have been made a lot interesting and connected back to things. And I hate to say it, but I think that it should have been when Vince Gilligan couldn't make Memory Vampire work, they should have abandoned the concept and done something entirely different.
Should we look at some of the praise this episode got then, just so you can...
Yeah, okay.
just so you can insult every critic of it now. So I talked about the one from Den of
You did.
Geek. Okay, so we've got Sherman and Pearson, the wanting to believe critical guys.
Oh, yeah.
They give it 5 out of 5,
Okay.
and these guys are normally pretty critical at that.
They are.
So they praised the script and Robert Patrick's performance. They said that Gilligan wrote the script with a dirtiness that gives it real power. That's quoting directly. And they said that Patrick's acting in this episode is extraordinary.
I am wondering how much of this is just like blasé. I've seen Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad, and the grittiness of Mexico doesn't really sort of make me sit up anymore, because it's like I've watched 10 seasons of this done perfectly well. It's not really notable.
I think it's kind of interesting in the Mexico set bits in Breaking Bad, though, that the cartel is fabulously wealthy, and so a lot of the Mexico set bits are on things like Don Hilario's massive, expansive, very beautiful villa. Okay, Shimon and Pearson also were very complimentary, saying that this felt like a fresh take on the X-Files when it had been kind of going a bit stale, which I will give them. It's a very unique episode. There's not any others like it.
I'd also say, yeah. Well, I don't know if stale so much as season 9 feels it doesn't know what it wants to do, and everything you brought up about the problems of Genesis of, Chris Carter and Gillian Anderson possibly not being involved, I think that really wrecked everything when they came back in again.
Okay, Megan Deans of Tor.com said that it was a bright spot in a dark and dismal season, both in terms of script and shooting, she specified.
To be fair, what was it? Lord of the Flies is the only one we've really liked so far, isn't it?
Yeah, I still don't think Lord of the Flies is top tier.
Oh,
either.
no, but it's like the one good part of the season so far. I mean, season 9 was the last season before it got cancelled, which also kind of indicates a few things.
She also complimented the focus on Doggett and the script focusing on his strong character arc, which we've already kind of disagreed with. And she, interestingly in her conclusion, she said the episode was part of the X-Files more so than would an alien or mutant, which made me wonder what series she was watching up till now.
Yeah, I'm kind of mystified, because if it was a matter of Doggett's faith in something being questioned, sure, but that's not what this is. I also don't actually find Doggett that interesting as a character, I must confess.
And the last one is M.A. Krang, who we've mentioned before. They're a more recent critic. They wrote Denying the Truth, Revisiting the X-Files After 9/11. And again, they praised the concept of the episode, the cinematography, and Robert Patrick, and referred to it as a stylishly produced entry. But they're the critics I have for this one.
Yeah.
And as I said, no one's got anything bad to say.
No.
Shall we talk about Hellbound?
We should talk about Hellbound. Hellbound, directed by Kim Manners, written by David Amann, and first podcast on the 27th of Jan 2002. So, James McDonald plays Detective Van Allen. He was in Fallout 4.
Okay.
Cyril O'Reilly is Ed Kelso. So the first two of these were things I didn't know existed, and I might have to go and find. Okay, so Unspeakable, Beyond the Wall of Sleep.
Okay.
The Lovecraft story.
Oh.
And H.P. Lovecraft's The Old Ones.
Okay.
There's also in Star Trek Deep Space Nine and Airplane.
Huh.
Katie Boyer was Dr. Lisa Holland, who was in Minority Report, Millennium, Lost World, Jurassic Park, Babylon 5, and Star Trek Next Generation. George O. Wallace was Dr. Bertram Mueller, who was also in Minority Report. What are the chances? Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and Star Trek Next Generation. So would you like to tell us about Hellbound?
Sure. Our episode this time opens in Novi, Virginia, where we see a support group for ex-convicts with anger issues led by Dr. Lisa Holland. Terry Pruitt talks about how pleased he is to have found the group, commenting that he has used it to make amends for his past. Another member, who's called Ed, tells him more cynically that humans can't change and that they're all destined for hell. As the group cycles round, Ed's friend, Victor Potts, discusses how he's been having nightmares that involve people being skinned alive. We see from the faces of other members of the group that this may be something that's been happening to more than one person. As they leave that night, he has a victim of Ed having been skinned, and several hours later, Victor is murdered. Although there is nothing initially to suggest that the case is an X-Files, Reyes just has a feeling about it and asks Doggett and Scully to examine the body with her. Reyes explains because Potts had a premonition of his own death, she would consider it an X-File as well. Meanwhile, at the butchery where they work, Terry and Ed get into an argument, and Terry has a vision that is very similar to Victor's, in which he sees Ed skinned alive. That night, Terry is also attacked at the butchery, strung up by his ankles, and flayed alive. Reyes and Doggett arrive in Novi and talk to the detective there, who's called Detective Van Allen. He doesn't seem very interested in the case, in part because the victims are all ex-convicts. At the same time, Scully contacts Dr. Bertram Mueller, who was a medical examiner who autopsied several bodies in the 1960s that were skinned in a manner that seems similar and almost identical to Potts. Mueller tells Scully that the sheriff at the time also did not pay much attention to the cases, and is the first person to express to Scully that there was a string of them. This sheriff also later killed himself. Reyes and Doggett learn of Terry's attack and arrive at the butchery to find him hanging amongst the pigs. While they look around the crime scene, Doggett realises that Terry is somehow still alive, and when asking who did this to him, Terry weakly manages to say Ed's name before passing out. Doggett heads a sting on Ed's house and arrests him with help of the local police, Ed all the while claiming he's innocent. Reyes believes him as she interrogates him and admits that she has also been having similar visions, something that Doggett does not believe in and is not supportive of. Ed is freed, but not before having a vision in which he sees Dr. Holland skinned alive. In the meantime, Scully discovers that Potts and Terry were both born on the same day that two of the 1960s murder victims were killed. Reyes insists that Ed is going to be in danger, and, although not really believing her, Doggett agrees to stake out his house. Regardless of Doggett's attempts, Ed is somehow skinned inside the house, his mouth stuffed with a soot-covered rag that stops him from screaming. Reyes finally admits to Doggett that she is having the same premonitions that the victims are experiencing, and points out the rag is coated in coal dust from a nearby mine, although she has never seen the body, so how she knows about this is in question. Reyes and Doggett head to the mine from where they believe this dust came from, and while there, Doggett finds the skeleton of a sheriff who apparently killed himself in 1909. While looking around the mine, Reyes finds newspaper clippings explaining the story. In 1868, a group of 4 miners murdered a man. The murderer's soul has reincarnated several times since, only to be brutally skinned by the soul of the victim. In each case, the murderer is always a lawman, and as Reyes stumbles across the collected skins of the recent victims, she is attacked by Van Allen, revealing him to be the current killer. Doggett finds Reyes unharmed, and Reyes explains to Doggett that Van Allen is avenging his own murder, and that all the murderers are linked. As they are always killed in groups of 4, that means that there is still one person remaining. Reyes frantically calls Holland, informing her that she's the 4th victim. Van Allen arrives at the church to kill her, but is stopped by Reyes, who shoots him. Later, at the hospital, Reyes muses to Scully that in the past she has always failed to stop Van Allen's spirit. In this life, however, she has managed to succeed. However, this is not the case. Van Allen suddenly takes a turn for his worth and dies on the operating table, only as we see in the final moments to be reincarnated into a newborn baby.
Thank you. Isn't the point of reincarnation meant to be a bit vague and meant to be like, I know in this episode they certainly imply it's date of birth, but would it really happen after the child has been born and then sort of cleaned up and put into an incubator and everything else?
I believe, we're looking at certain religions here, but in Buddhism, there is a cycle of reincarnation, so you don't reincarnate immediately. I can't remember what the time frame is, but I want to say in my head it's about 40 days or something. So you will pass on, and then 40 days later, then you will be reincarnated in a new body or a new form or animal or whatever.
Yeah. I would normally think it would be point of birth or before birth, not after birth, when you sort of reincarnate into
We're
someone.
getting really into the question of where does the soul originate?
Yeah, and there are various...
Apparently it's well after birth.
Oh, yes, apparently. One thing I just realised listening to the summary is... we've complained about it a few times, but no one actually understands Reyes' character, do they? There's like... I can see it like there's a whiteboard in the X-Files writer's room, and there's the Mulder whiteboard over there where they've sort of put a sheet over it, and Scully's got one, and Dogger's got one, or Dogger's got half of one, and then Reyes is on the other half of it, and it's got a post on it which just says psychic with a question mark. And that's it.
We have critiqued this in the past that Reyes does not really have an anchor.
No, but I don't think she's got a defined character either.
Other than being affable and at least believes she's psychic.
Yeah. There's nothing hard and fast, because everything just seems to be dropped by the wayside. I mean, like, her whole relationship with Carrie Elway's character has resulted in nothing. I suppose the most kind of weird curio that they've just completely lost somewhere along the lines is that she used to smoke, which is a weird thing they kept up for like 2 or 3 episodes and dropped entirely as well.
I thought that was an interesting little character quirk, given that smoking is something we associate with villains in the X-Files.
Yeah, and we're gonna put a pin in this, because we're gonna have to return to this one eventually. But yeah, but I still think Reyes was conceived as Doggett's friend for that one episode she showed up in. And for some reason they decided to repurpose her as a main character without doing any of the groundwork.
It should be noted that she's not unlikable, though.
No, I want to be like Reyes. She's like one of the things I look forward to revisiting the series for, but watching it critically, it's why is she here? Other than Gilligan Anderson wanted to be written out, but now you've got to juggle Reyes and Scully, and you're apparently not equipped to do it.
I do think, as you've said before, that Gillian Anderson wanting to be written out is what's caused problems here, because she wanted to be written out, Reyes was supposed to replace her, and then she changed her mind.
Yeah.
So you kind of have these two people vying for the Scully position.
Yes, and I think that's the problem, is the writers... I think I made that point a few weeks ago, is the writers can write for the Mulder and Scully template, and that's what they've kind of pigeonholed themselves into. Having 2 women apparently is beyond the capacity to understand.
We have just kind of split the Scully character, so Scully's now not very active but still doing the forensic stuff, and Monica's doing the field work.
Absolutely, but that means that Scully can rest on 8 previous seasons of characterization. Reyes has nothing behind her, and she's struggling with a half-formed character.
Yeah.
And this episode is... I don't mind Monica being psychic. I mean, I think that's an interesting character quirk to give someone in the X-Files situation.
I'm going to go a step further. I don't mind Monica, and even the vagaries of, is she psychic? Is she a bit sensitive? Is she just believing this quite harmlessly?
Yeah.
Is it something that's going to cause her trouble later when she assumes she's psychic and gets it wrong? You can do a lot with that. My issue is specific to this episode, is I don't like her being so integral. She's the fulcrum of the plot, essentially. She is one of these reincarnated entities.
Yes, and you brought up at the same time Field Where I Died, the last time we tried to pull this stunt, which was also really awful and terrible and awkward, and we hated it.
It's a shame, because that is the one facet of this episode I don't like, and I do like the episode as a whole. I think it's an effective Monster of the Week episode. It's actually quite scary. It's pretty gory for a Monster of the Week episode. It's got fantastic special effects, and I'll get into that in a minute, because the special effects, just the lengths they went to create those skin bodies, is really actually impressive. But I think it could have been done without Monica being the reincarnation of a sheriff who has just failed to solve this crime over and over, and usually shoots themselves, but for some reason Monica hasn't.
Yes, because I think it draws too much attention away from the villain, who it feels like you can figure out pretty quickly who it is just by attrition of the rest of the guest cast, given they narrow down so fast.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's one of these two. Well, guess it's him.
I kind of figured, I couldn't remember who it was when we started watching it, that it had to either be him or the woman running the self-help group.
Yeah, and it turned out to be the detective.
Yeah.
But I don't think he wasn't enough of a presence in the episode to actually even be a decent villain, because he just doesn't show up enough.
Mm.
I also realised, in your synopsis, the skinned guy who survives, and by logic he shouldn't be able to, and he should be dead anyway, no one seems to mention if he does die. Are we just meant to take that as read?
I guess he just lived long enough to pass on that message.
There's almost no way he could possibly be alive.
He could not have survived that long.
No. But I mean, he shouldn't be alive then.
There's a famous and possibly fictional method of torture called the death by 1,000 cuts, or Ling Chi, It was supposedly a brutal form of Chinese torture designed to keep people alive as much as possible while bits of their skin and body were peeled away. And essentially that's what you've seen here, but people have critiqued Lin Chi in real life, kind of saying that your body's designed to shut down. So essentially, by the time you've inflicted a substantial amount of pain on it, you'd just lose conscious and Ling Chi would be over it. It could never function as this method that could keep people alive for days.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what you got here in this. It's a horrifying thought that a guy's had his entire skin, the largest organ of his body, entirely removed, and he's yet somehow still conscious and still alive.
Yeah. And going on from that, though, it's very implausible for this to happen anyway.
Mm.
What is with people not preparing people for what they're going to see if it's a serving? Because, like, Reyes just drags Doggett to see his body. It doesn't say, oh, he's been completely skinned. Just be worried.
Hey, take a look at this.
Yeah. I mean, it's like Mulder dragging Scully to the grave desecration in Irresistible.
Yeah.
You could have just given her a bit of warning. That's common courtesy. At the same time, though, how unconcerned Doggett and Scully seem to be about the bodies feels very weird to me.
Mm.
They don't seem to take it very seriously at all.
I mean, skinning something like that should be masterful.
Yes.
To skin something that perfectly.
Yeah, that's a level of detail craft and time that begs a lot of questions.
Apparently it's really quick, though, based on how quickly Ed is skinned.
Yes. And also that weird comment about Asian drug gangs or something. Is this something that happens in the real world? Because
I must admit, I didn't put research into that. I already have a worrying search history.
I mean, I can see it being something that if you are the kind of person who can stomach doing this, and you want to really send a message to someone, yeah, you probably could do this.
Mm.
Not going to do it very often. It's not going to be something you could do quickly. It's going to be very messy, very slow.
It's not going to come off in one piece like we see it has done at the end of that episode, including like their faces. I mean, even if you're skinning, like, say, a chunk of torso can come off in one go, going around like the nose and ears and stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird questions on it. I mean, I've sort of brought to mind Face Off as well, with that's implausible technology.
The one it made me think of was Silent Hill, the movie, where Pyramid Head just grabs that woman's skin and rips it off her body.
Because that's how that works. Then she's just implied dead off screen as well.
Mm.
The blaseness of Doggett and Scully reads wrong to me, and it's the whole, this very least should be, exceptionally violent crime or something. You can have them say, it's not our department, but they don't seem to think it's a troublesome thing to see.
Maybe they just see totally skinned corpses every day? God, I hope not.
I hope not as well. Jesus.
But yeah, the special effect to make those flayed corpses was really interesting, this reading it. It was a massively complex... Essentially, they got a mannequin, sprayed like liquid latex over the top of it, and then just peeled it off while it was still wet, piece by piece, and put it on another mannequin that was shaped like the victim they were trying to look at, and shaped it that way, then overlaying this kind of pattern of, raw skin and veins and stuff. And Robert Patrick commented that these special effect artists were working 36-hour days just to get it looking that kind of realistic, glistening, moist meat sort of look to it. Which, it's gruesome, but really impressive, and I always appreciate when you do something as a practical effect.
Oh yeah, that was really good. I did notice there's one shot, though, where they apparently something went wrong.
Oh yeah?
It's when he's dangling upside down and says Ed's name.
Yeah.
It looks bone dry.
Oh, okay.
There's one shot where they've messed up somehow and it doesn't look wet.
Doesn't look kind of glistening.
No.
Oh, that's a shame.
It just sort of a whole, oh, okay, something's gone wrong there.
But I said I'd bring up the illusion as well because I mentioned it about 87 times while we were watching, I think, though. The thing that I kept thinking of was my favourite movie, possibly of all time, Hellraiser.
It's hard not to think about Frank while watching this film, and to a certain extent,
Julia
in Hellraiser 2.
Mm. But Frank has that kind of same sort of look of... He starts off as a really impressive puppet, actually, like skeletal puppet. And the more people he kills throughout the film, he slowly starts getting more organs and flesh and skin. But for a large part of the movie, he does have a real look of that. And of course, this episode's called Hellbound, and the book that Hellraiser is based on is The Hellbound Heart.
Quite so.
Which made me wonder if something's there.
It feels unlikely to be writing for something like The X-Files and to have hit upon all that and not have ever thought of Hellraiser at any point during the process.
Yeah.
Someone somewhere involved in this was thinking, oh, right, I've been waiting for this.
Yeah.
But I think you point as well though, that Frank and Zula look possibly more effective.
It could have been just, well, Hellraiser was notoriously low budget, but at the same time, they did have a decent practical effect buffet, except for the engineer, which still looks abysmal, and I'm criticising that even though the movie was made in 1987. But at the same time, like, the Cenobites, like Pinhead, their prosthesis looks really good in there.
Yeah.
As does Frank in all his different incarnations, from the puppet to the fully formed stage.
Oh, yeah. I think it's again one of these episodes where the focus is wrong, and I do wonder how much of it is Reyes again. And I don't know, I just feel like I keep going in on Reyes, but it's hard not to in some ways. But it's that, are we panicking that she's not working still, that no one has a handle on how to write her?
I'm not sure. I think we've got it down better than we did in Demonicus, to be honest.
Yes.
Because Demonicus, she just seemed ineffectual. She was very deer in the headlights. But now she is taking charge of the investigation.
That's true. Okay, that's a good point. I didn't question how she was still employed in this episode.
After Demonicus.
Well, I think even Demonicus, I was questioning how on earth she was employed.
But in Demonicus, as well, you saw that she was getting squeamish of crime scenes, which we do see from time to time in the X-Files. There's always that thing that goes above a comfort level, like Scully in Irresistible.
Yeah.
But in this episode, Monica's whipping sheets off flayed bodies and saying, look at this! There we are.
I would say also, it's hard to do it Hellraiser again, but there's a nice white sheet over a corpse that has no skin. Should that sheet not be scarlet by the time she whips it away?
It's imagery they use in Hellraiser a lot, actually, of blood soaking through white sheets.
Yeah. So it's really odd to see the sheets not take up the blood, which should be there in copious amounts. You'd have thought.
They're waxed on the other side.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure we have the specific ones for flayed corpses, do we?
Yeah. They're like painting sheets.
Ah, okay. The actual plot of the episode, though, is about, crime free beyond the grave. It's basically blaming the son for the crimes of the father.
Yeah.
Seen this done in other things as well. What point do you want to say to the vengeance from beyond the graves of, have you not done it enough? This is a lot of people you've skinned for the one time it was done to you.
I did think that's what it's lacking is...
Why does it keep going?
He keeps saying I failed at the end of it, but he's not. In every other cycle, you've killed all of the people who killed you.
Yeah.
And then yourself.
Yeah. To do it again.
To do it again every time. So what is the success condition?
I don't know either. Yeah, and again, I think that's the episode's focused on the wrong way. We've focused it onto Reyes, and we should have focused it onto the monster again.
Yeah.
And I think you made the point as well, though, is Reyes, shoot him in the knee.
Doggett manages it.
Exactly. At the same time, if killing him gives him what he wants, assuming he kills the doctor,
yeah,
don't do that. I don't know. It's another hard one to talk about because it's kind of about Reyes, but kind of not about Reyes. And
it's also the inconsistency with the spirits in this, because evidently the killer can remember everything that's happened.
I suppose that's a good point.
But everyone else just gets these flayed man visions.
Yeah, I think that's an odd one to do in a reincarnation story like this. What was the season 1 one with terrifying child who went on to voice Fluttershy?
Born Again.
So we don't actually know what she did and didn't know, but she did seem to be cognizant of the past life memories. And then when the condition was fulfilled, the spirit left her alone and she became a normal girl.
Yeah, I felt that was less the little girl in charge and more he'd just taken over her body.
Yeah.
So it was all the wronged man's memories, and when he had succeeded, he just left and she was just normal girl with no memory of what had happened.
Yeah, and I think is the problem with this episode, it's too complicated.
Yeah.
Because you can buy that situation in season 1. That would perfectly fine. It still wasn't one of the great episodes of the season, but at least it wasn't one of the worst. I think the problem is you've got the reincarnating killer who can remember, and then you've got the reincarnating victims who can't, and the sheriff who also can't.
And also on that basis, who is Monica actually in this cycle? Because I was vague on that. A lot of the things I have read have said she's part of it. It seems to infer that because she has the villains.
Yeah.
But she's not one of the 4 deaths.
No, she seemed to be the sheriff who was investigating it and failed.
But the sheriff is... I presume she was the sheriff from that time, but that means where was the sheriff in every other cycle?
Yes.
Because the sheriff is usually the reincarnation of the victim.
Yeah, so...
So where is Monica's character in every other cycle? I know the implication here was she's the reincarnation of the original sheriff.
Yeah.
Which would, then you could do that as the key point of, if he's never reincarnated before, he's reincarnating to stop all this.
Yeah.
Although she doesn't manage to do that, so that's evidently not what we were getting for.
Okay, well, I'll go on a limb here and say that's what is meant to be expressed to us, but that's not what comes across.
Yeah.
That's the intent.
I thought it was just left feeling very confused. You know, as I said, I couldn't 100% say who Monica was supposed to be in the cycle, just because, like you, I assumed she was the sheriff, and then when I was thinking about it, I thought, well, hang on, where was this character in the other 2 cycles we saw? And I don't think there's another analogy for her.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Mm.
Was someone saying, we need another episode like Tombs, and someone wants to do a 30-year cycle thing again? Apparently not understanding that why Tombs had a 30-year cycle was intrinsic to who he was.
It was his biology of needing to feed every 30 years.
There was the rules were all set up in in Squeeze, and they carried over into Tombs, and that all worked together, and that was fine. That's why you had the time-displaced serial killer.
Yeah.
That was fine. And it kind of feels like we're trying to redo it, but without understanding anything. And I do have to wonder, is it because they tied it to Reyes is why the reincarnation thing is actually is wonky in terms of expression? And if they hadn't done that, this wouldn't feel so weird.
Yeah.
Or even if it's just one generation, could it not have just been one generation back?
I don't think you even really needed her reincarnation, because the whole thing was set up as an X-File anyway. You know, she made the compelling argument as to why it should be considered an X-File at the start when people questioned it.
Yeah.
Therefore, you don't need her to have a personal connection. You don't need her to have visions. You could have her using her psychic empathy powers just that she knows that Ed's telling the truth.
Yeah.
She doesn't need to have the same visions as him.
No.
It's just, as you say, it's an extra layer it doesn't really need.
No, but I also think that making it from 1906 or whatever it was, just said it 30 years ago. We don't need the other 2 incarnations.
I think you had a few cycles in there, because the original murder was in 1860-something.
Oh, okay.
Then you had the Skeleton the Sheriff, who was 1909, I think. Then you had the murders in the 1960s.
Yeah.
And then you've got this present one, so I'm not sure what the gap was between them, or if we're missing a cycle somewhere or anything like that. But those are the ones that we were made aware of, those just 3 cycles after the original.
Yeah, I think we should have just stuck with it just being from the 60s. It's like, this is something that happened in the 60s and no one made the connection. And we didn't need to have the repetition, because I don't think they do anything with it. No,
not really. It's kind of a shame, because you've overcomplicated something that's got some really neat, grisly set pieces. I like the bit where, as stupid as it is, where they find him strung up like the pigs around him, and he's still alive. I like the bit where she finds the place where he's like got his trophy full of the hung skins and stuff like that. It's actually quite dark for the X-Files.
Oh, yeah. And it's like, I don't think there was a problem with any of the guest characters or the guest cast. Everyone's sort of doing their thing.
I thought especially the convicts get it across, because they're all big, burly, aggressive men who are really, really scared. Yes. And they get that balance quite nice, all of them, particularly Ed.
Yes, and the guy who's sort of genuinely trying to be a better person now. And
Victor, the first one.
Victor, yeah, just how he's presented and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, that all works. It's just... Reyes is the problem. Oh my god.
Not even Reyes, just overcomplicating it to make her more integral.
That's true, and she didn't need to be. What do we got next? We must have something better next. Unless we've got anything else.
No, I think I'm good. I've said my piece. I actually rather like the episode, but yeah, I concede it's got its problems. It's not top tier again, which seems to be the reoccurring problem of this season.
I suppose I'll give it that it wasn't as... It didn't feel like it dragged as much as John Doe did.
Or Demonicus. Okay, next time we're going back to the conspiracy. We have Provenance and Providence.
I remember bits and pieces of this one.
I'm sure I'll remember it when I start watching it, but I don't recall it from the name.
Yes, it does. And I don't know if this is going to affect anything. It does involve William. If you actually are a memory vampire, please stop coming to my house, because I want to remember that I've actually watched John Doe and what happens in it, so I don't have to watch it again. You can write to us, though, and tell us if you're a memory vampire and what makes you tick it, and why the cartels hire you to wipe people's memories and leave them wandering around town until they get picked up by other criminal people and use... What is going on? Regardless, our email address is thingsargettingstrange42@gmail.com.
Same question, but you can also ask it on our social media. We're on Twitter and Tumblr @GetStrange42, on Mastodon @GetStrange42@universedon.com, and on Facebook, where you can find us by searching for Things Are Getting Stranger, your Next Files Rewatch podcast. And do hit me up if you want me to promote anything at the start of the show, as I've been doing for FileFest. If you're also not sick of my voice right now, I am also live on Twitch TV where I stream PlayStation 5 games. My main stream is Mondays and Wednesdays at 8pm GMT and Saturdays at 5pm GMT under the name Adverse Camber 42. At the moment I'm looking at Star Wars Jedi Survivor, Baldur's Gate 3, and Poppy Playtime, where I'm currently on Chapter 3.
We have a Patreon, patreon.com/thingsgettingstrange, where for the little $3 a month, you too can watch us become Craig Wilmore and be killed.
Over and over again.
And meet Mulder and Scully, which is the high point, and then lose them all again. Our theme music is envisioned by Kevin MacLeod. You can find it on compotech.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. Thank you all for listening, and until next time, please remember...
I'll take the bad as long as I can remember the good.